So, my presentation is on Auguste Comte. First we're gonna, oh, that's not right. Life and background. So, Auguste Comte was born in 1789 in France in the aftermath of the French Revolution, which undoubtedly affected his worldviews and philosophies because it was a great time of political change. This was an era of scientific reasoning and the start of industrialization that was kind of caused by the French Revolution. His family were devout Catholics and extremely conservative, and although he grew up surrounded by these religious beliefs, he eventually broke away to immerse himself in the French Enlightenment. And this was mostly because at age 19, Comte met Henri de Saint-Simon, who was a sociologist who advocated for socialism, which wasn't surprising because it was a time right after the French Revolution, which was before was extremely conservative. His theories on social reform, science and industry, and the changing social order intensely influenced young Comte's beliefs. He became Saint-Simon's secretary and collaborator in many things. This time gave him much valuable experience on social theory. Despite this partnership and camaraderie, their relationship eventually dissolved due to disagreements on either authorship on certain works that they may have created together, or ideas that they may have kind of formed as a unit. But it also could have been because Saint-Simon's views were not very scientifically backed. They were highly philosophical, and as we will later learn, Comte's views were extremely based on science, and that was very important to him. So, regardless of this, Saint-Simon's influence is still very obvious in Comte's work. So, Comte struggled to find academic employment in his younger years, and he had many financial difficulties, but in spite of this, he still managed to publish major sociological works and leave a legacy. So, Comte's positivism is probably his most well-known and most influential theory. And positivism is a philosophical approach that emphasizes scientific methods and observable empirical evidence as the only reliable source of knowledge in the world. So positivism rejects explanations that are based on supernatural forces, abstract ideas, intuition, or guesswork, and it instead relies on empirical observation, experimentation, and logical reasoning. So it values like sturdy fact. Comte applied positivism to sociology. That was his contribution, and he believed that sociology can be approached just like any other science. It should be respected as such, and he believed we should use the scientific method to find laws in our society that govern our behavior. So he believed that sociology had laws just like physics or any other science. And he taught the importance of what Emile Durkheim would later call social facts, which are observable patterns of behavior and interaction. He advocated that these social facts should be studied and analyzed scientifically. Okay, so next was his theory of the law of three stages. And the law of three stages argues that all societies and forms of knowledge inevitably progress through three distinct stages. And this is highly evolutionary. He doesn't believe that a society is one of the three. He believes that it starts at theological and it ends at the positive. So the theological stage, the initial stage, is characterized by supernatural explanations and attributes events to divine forces or spirits, and religion dominates over thought. Society is organized around kinship structures with the military, and it relies on religious beliefs for social cohesion. So not scientific, very religious. Next is the metaphysical stage and emerges from the previous theological stage. And this transitional stage is kind of in between the theological and positive. It relies on speculative ideas and abstract reasoning and concepts, but it is not quite based on evidence and sure fact quite yet. Legal systems start to become more prominent. So finally, there's the positive stage, which is the final and most advanced stage, and it marks a period of scientific thinking. So empirical observation, logical thinking, and experimentation are the primary ways of gaining knowledge, and scientists hold the highest ranking of intellectual authority, so people aren't turning to religious figures as much for answers of the world around them. And progress is driven through discoveries and laws. Society is industrialized, and the state and laws still maintain social cohesion. It is obvious in this theory that Comte holds his idea of social positivism in very high regard. And because in this theory, it is the final and most developed, most civilized stage. And this law seems to follow along the path of evolution of humans, from theological speculation all the way to scientific knowledge. Within this reflects Comte's hierarchy of sciences, where sociology is at the top because of this metaphorical pyramid, because it is the most complex, the most important, but it only emerges after the other sciences have kind of established the groundwork. So later sociologists have criticized Comte's law of three stages as being overly simplistic, Eurocentric, and it neglects other factors in social change. So this law is formed solely from Western historical examples and doesn't take into consideration other types of societies. So Comte was born after the French Revolution, as previously mentioned, which definitely contributes to his own linear view of process and his unnuanced takes. Okay, Next is his theory of social statics. Comte defined social statics as a study of the structures that hold society together, focusing on different elements of society and how they interrelate. So basically, in this theory, he compares an organism that relies on its organs and a society that relies on its interrelated parts. And it was definitely inspired by the era of Enlightenment and the discussion of biology in his era. From this theory, Comte identifies the family unit as the most basic social unit, and they provide the foundation for larger units. So society is the larger part, and its smaller units, like family units. He subsequently believed that in order to understand large social structures, we need to study and analyze its substructures. As societies evolve, Comte said that specialized institutions emerge to fulfill specific functions, and this is differentiation, and this happens as societies become more complex, according to him. Comte recognized that in order to maintain social cohesion and integration amidst social differentiation, there are certain mechanisms to accomplish this. So, like a common morality that holds society together, a central authority, which is government, and interdependence. So, these different parts of society need to rely on one another. Okay, Comte's impacts. Auguste Comte changed sociology. Before him, sociology was largely philosophical. It didn't rely on science or evidence. It didn't consider itself a science. But he sought to establish that sociology was a distinct science that required the same methods and disciplines as others, and he wanted it to be dedicated to studying the functions, structures, and evolution of human societies. He advocated that the scientific method should be used along with data, observation, and evidence, and he believed that there was a definite link between observation and theory, and that theory should guide observation, and that theory should be backed by empirical evidence and study. And this viewpoint distinguished sociology from other branches of philosophy, which were not scientific necessarily, or viewed as scientific during that time. He introduced key concepts such as social statics, social dynamics, and social evolution, and these were used and transformed by many future sociologists. Okay, critiques. So he was critiqued as being oversimplifying things and being very deterministic. So the law of three stages is criticized as being far too rigid, simple, and linear. And this linear model of evolution doesn't adequately account for the complexities of society, historical and social context, and other things that could cause progress rather than simply scientific progression. So he also neglects individual agency and subjectivity. So the focus is largely on social structures and overarching laws that govern our society, so largely macro theories, but it doesn't leave much room for how individuals interact with society. So John Stuart Mill was one of the critics who critiqued his lack of nuance, also involving the psychology of an individual. So political bias. In his later works, such as Religion of Humanity, he leans toward authoritarian tendencies, and he believed in a strong hierarchical order, which could be pretty undemocratic and oppressive. And he also had a clear bias in his work, as mentioned several times, of his experience growing up after the French Revolution. Okay, his works. I'm not necessarily going to go into depth about his works. The descriptions are listed here, but his works were very influential. They definitely changed how sociology was viewed. And yes, he had 3 major works, 2 of which were a series of editions. But okay. Comte and Emile Durkheim. Comte's conceptualization of society as an organism with interdependent parts provided a foundation for Emile Durkheim's functionalist approach. Durkheim would go on to explore how the individual parts of society lend to the stability as a whole. They both have similar views on how society progresses and evolves and the idea of social solidarity, but their theories and ideas diverge when it came to the law of three stages because Comte was too simplistic with it and it didn't align with Durkheim's complex views of society, which were definitely less linear. Okay, contemporary application. So data-driven policymaking. Comte's advocacy for positivism in his views of social statics definitely influence how governments and like healthcare makers use social data about like illnesses or just general statistics to create policies. Understanding societal evolution. So the law of three stages, while it is seen as too simplistic and it doesn't fully cover nuances, it still can be used to explain the decline in modern times of religious authority in most areas of the world. So there's been a visible shift from looking to religion for authority to looking to science.